And what steak would you like, sir?
Bring me your filet mignon.
Excellent choice.
It's my favorite cut.
And how would you like it prepared, sir?
Rare.
Very good. Medium rare?
Not medium rare. Did I say medium?
No,
I didn't. I said rare.
Yes, sir.
I want it really, really, really rare.
Really rare?
Really. Cook it for 8 seconds and bring it out here.
Quite rare, then.
The rarest of rare.
There will be blood.
In fact, don't even cook it.
Will not be presented at this time.
Shall I just bring you the cow, sir?
So that we may bring you this special podcast.
Perfect.
It's almost live. Still alive.
It's alive!
A limited podcast series about Northwest Television's legendary TV sketch comedy show.
An amazing phenomenon.
Featuring intimate conversations with the writers, performers, creators.
Rustlers, cutthroats, murderers, bounty hunters, desperados, bushwhackers, hornswagglers, horse thieves, bulldykes, train robbers, bank robbers, ass-kickers, shit-kickers, and murderers.
Your host was one of them.
I think I would remember a thing like that.
Pat Cashman.
What's the matter with you?
Almost live.
This is just a real nice surprise.
Still alive.
Just a real nice surprise.
There was only one Keister on Almost Live. One Conway, one Nye, one Nelson, Wilson, Wyatt, and Stainton. McHale was the only one with a prefix. There were 2 Guppys, Nancy and Joe, but they were married to one another, so that doesn't count. But the show's 2 different Shafers were unconnected, unrelated, and unalike. But Scott Shafer, unlike the show's original host, Ross Shafer, was also a key member of the show nearly from the start. A native of Seattle, Scott came to the program with clever ideas, some sharp writing, and actual TV production knowledge. Today, Scott Shafer runs the award-winning local news business, South King Media, covering the happenings in local towns, from SeaTac to White Center to Burien. He also runs the hyper-local website, I Love Kent. Yep, the very town that became Almost Live's #1 punchline. In 2020, Scott was named Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce's Corporate Citizen of the Year. Yet another example of Almost Live being an unlikely springboard to eventual respectability. Living nowadays in Burien with his wife Teresa, her mom, 2 nearly grown kids, a couple of chihuahuas, 2 cats, and a lizard. Let's snag a conversation now with Scott Shafer.
You know, a lot of people might think with a name like Shafer that maybe I was Ross Shafer's little brother. That I got that a lot, but I have to clarify there was no nepotism involved. My Shafer is spelled Schaefer, and Ross is spelled wrong, so there's no relation.
Well, was it ever a problem? I mean, when you first submitted your, we'll get into that, but when you first submitted your application to work on the show, they say, wait a minute, are you pulling our leg? Your name is Shafer too?
Now, I think that producer Dana Dwinell could read, and I made it very clear. I typed it, I think on an IBM Selectric typewriter, and you could tell that Shafer was spelled the correct way. So,
man, can that Dana Dwinell read? I mean, she really
is
what
a good reader.
So you grew up not far from where you live today, although you took a long detour along your life. Where did you grow up specifically? Not Burien, but
West Seattle. Grew up in a middle-class family in West Seattle, and there's a funny story about when my parents bought a new house around 1970, I think, and we moved to this house, and it was the previous owner, and in fact the previous inhabitant of my bedroom that I took over was a guy named Ryan Stiles, who's a very famous and incredibly talented improv comedian actor.
Well, we'll have a sunny day tomorrow. What do you mean it is tomorrow? Last call? I didn't hear last call. Someone take me home.
And so, the Shafers bought the house from the Stiles family, who I believe were moving up to British Columbia for the father had a job up there. So anyway, it's kind of a funny story that I inherited Ryan Stiles' old bedroom, and I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking maybe it was haunted in a way by some humorous ghost, who like to pull pranks and make people feel funnier than they really are. I don't know.
Maybe it is. It is kind of a coincidence that you both got that gene somehow.
Yeah, and the shag red carpet was really the topper.
Did you ever catch up with him and say, hey, you know what? I lived in your house.
I did many years later when I was producing a pilot that I sold for to CBS with Moffat Lee Productions. The show was called Say What, and we were casting for a couple of sketches, and we wanted kind of a tall, goofy guy, and we got a bunch of headshots. And his came in, and this was before he had been on Whose Line Is It Anyway or any other show that I knew of.
Yeah.
But I recognized his name and his face. He had obviously grown up finally. And so we brought him in, and I cast him in this sketch. And I jokingly, my first words to him were the address of the house that we purchased from his family. And he said, I knew it was you. And so we caught up, and it was just hilarious. It was just one of those weird coincidences.
You know who moved into the house I grew up in? Larry Swenson.
Larry Swenson.
Yeah.
Should I know who that is?
No, I don't think so. He's just a plumber.
Okay.
Here's something I was thinking about the other day, Scott. With Almost Live, there was it was a comedy show, but unlike most comedy shows, they didn't put the show together and say, okay, now let's hire a bunch of experienced comedy writers. There was nobody who had comedy writing experience per se that I can think of in the history of that show. They all came from somewhere else, had no previous TV writing experience for the most part. And, which is part of the remarkable thing about the show, I think, is that people, rather than coming in already equipped to write comedy, had to kind of learn on the job.
Indeed. Ross Schaefer, the original host, was a stand-up comedian, and I believe he had won the Seattle comedy competition.
Yeah.
And he was then hired at King to create a comedy show, and he brought along Jim Sharp, who he had worked with. I believe they had an ad agency in Tacoma.
Yeah.
And they brought it in, and then Dana Twinnell, I think she was already at King at the time. It was assigned to her, and she was the original producer. And so, Ross and Jim were very funny people, and they had, a comedic sense. And so it doesn't take much to just figure out how to turn that into a sketch or a monologue or a desk bit. And of course, it was new for everyone at the time, but we all kind of felt we didn't say this publicly, but we were just copying David Letterman.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you came out, did a monologue. There was a live band. Then there was a sketch maybe, and then we sat at a desk and guests came out. So it really wasn't a reinvention of the wheel, but.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to Almost Live.
No, the only difference was it was all locally oriented, and that's what made it work, is because the city of Seattle and the whole Northwest is got a lot of funny things, from city names like Squim and Puyallup to Big Hair and Kent or Linwood or, making fun of where I live now, Burien, for God's sake.
There's no surer way to identify an interloper or an outsider. Especially like if you see a new guy on the TV news, you can tell he's from someplace else because he'll be exposed. When he says Sequim instead of Squim or Puyallup instead of Puyallup. But most everybody from the show, that was part of the central cast and writing staff was from this area. So they knew of which they wrote and parodied for sure.
Yeah. And it was probably, looking back in my career, that was the most fun I had in any job, was the early days of Almost Live, when we'd go in and have writers meetings and we'd pitch ideas, and, it was just a lot of camaraderie. And of course, there's also a lot of competition. But it was exciting work, even though we were being paid I think I got $130 a week for that when I was first actually hired.
Hope you didn't blow that all at once. So were you Did you always think that you were a funny guy? I mean, were you the class clown, or how did you gravitate towards writing comedy and eventually getting an actual comedy writing job?
Well, I would peg my number one influence as my dad, Bob Schaefer. He was a really funny guy, and just growing up with a funny dad, big influence. And so I saw that the effect he would have on people is by being the funny guy, that coming up with a quick comeback, no matter what the situation, even a bad situation. He would, set people's minds at ease and somehow win people over. And I think just by experience, being exposed to that constantly, it made me want to be like him. And so I would attribute that, to my dad. He was a real estate agent in downtown Seattle, but at heart, he was a boogie-woogie piano player. He met my mom at the Cornish School of the Arts in a piano class. And, he was in World War II. And when he came back, he was on the GI Bill, went to the University of Washington, met the love of his life, got married. And I'm one of 4 kids, the only boy in the family, the only son. And so my dad, I'd put it number 1. Number 2, I'd put it J.P. Patches. I watched J.P. Patches and Gertrude.
Golly, I wish Gertrude were here to answer that question. How did I meet Gertrude?
How did you meet Gertrude? Let me tell you how I met Gertrude. Cut it out.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Wait a minute.
What?
I do this when you walked in, and I do that.
Oh,
See,
yeah?
you surprised me.
Okay.
I didn't surprise
do it
you.
again.
Let's
Wait.
do it over again.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see. How did I meet Gertrude? Now you're supposed to walk in.
Okay, good. Now
And
we can
sit down.
yeah, good.
And then they'll cut away.
Yeah.
And then you say, hi, Julius, or
Hi,
something.
Julius. How are you? Or
Hi,
something.
I'm fine. I'm just trying to remember. How'd you get here?
Well, how did I get
See,
here?
now, isn't that much better?
That's a lot. I like it.
See,
It's a lot
that's
easier.
why you were the sidekick.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, see? You
Notice it
couldn't
all
remember
rolls
the
downhill,
bit.
and I couldn't remember the
Okay,
bit. You're
now.
right.
And I was honored later to meet them in person a couple of times.
Yep.
And then the third one would be Mad Magazine. I was a voracious Mad Magazine reader.
Oh, me too.
Of a magazine that takes on politics, popular culture, nuclear power, advertising, racism, and just about every other foible of modern life.
Hey, in fact, I bought anything close to Mad Magazine. There were other rival magazines, not nearly as funny, but I got them anyway. Cracked.
Yes, I think Cracked, yes.
Remember Cracked?
And then later, National Lampoon.
And then there was one called Sick. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
They got progressively less funny but they were all kind of trying to be Mad Magazine.
They did, but there was only one true Mad Magazine. That it was so subversive, and the illustrations and comics were just amazing.
Did you collect comedy records? Were you into that?
I'm in my office now, and I'm looking at I got a stack of records on the floor, and the one facing me is, hold on, I'm going to get it here. It was a record my dad bought, Steve Allen's Funny Phone Call.
I have that album, believe it or not.
On Dot Records.
Yes, I have it.
He used to, call people, calling the auto club, Call to Seattle is on here.
And a comedian named Shelley Berman was part of that call.
Hello?
I'm a friend of Bob Ames. No, Bob Ames. Bob Ames. You know him?
Yes.
Well, now, I'm visiting up here in Seattle, and he told me to give you a buzz if I ever got into town. Cecile?
Yes.
I'm giving you a buzz.
It's fantastic. I collected every comedy album. They didn't even have to have any kind of pedigree. I didn't even have to have heard of them. If the album was in the comedy section, I would invariably buy it. So I've got all of stuff, and I've saved a lot of them. Yeah, I'm hard pressed to find a good record player around the house here, but those things were terribly influential, of course.
Oh yeah.
I don't know anybody who is even on the periphery of doing comedy that didn't also listen to a lot of comedy records.
A mother telling her daughter about sex. Birds and the bees.
Children, stop eating. I know it's the middle of dinner, but I want to tell you
about the birds and the bees.
Well, gee, Mom, I got studying to do.
I do too. I gotta go upstairs and poop. We don't say poo-poo. We say no-no. Poo-poo's a bad word. Your cousin always used that word. I don't like it. I want to talk about the birds and the bees. Now, you know your dad's working tonight. I wish he was here, because I need him desperately. It takes two. Mother bird and the father bird. How do birds do it? Very fast. And high in the air, idiot. Sometimes in trees, smart aleck.
So you're growing up. You went to high school, West Seattle High School?
Yeah, West Seattle High School.
Okay.
I was the editor of the high school newspaper. I was really into journalism at the time, and it was, we had a terrible football team, and occasionally I'd have to report on how bad they were. And
now, as the editor, you have to write editorials too. Did you get uprated for some of your controversial editorial writing?
Oh, yes. I didn't write editorials per se, but I did write a humor column called Man Bites Dog, that was kind of handed down to me from another humor writer at the high school. After he graduated, I took over his column, and, I would publish, once a week a collection of funny things going on at the school. And so that was good exercise, for pre-sketch writing is to start writing, little short blurbs that have a beginning, middle, and ending.
Well, getting back to your dad for a minute while I'm thinking of it, you said that he played boogie woogie music too. Did he ever have aspirations of pursuing music as a career instead of what did you say, he was an insurance man?
No, he was a real estate
guy. That's right.
For business real estate, commercial real estate in downtown Seattle. And yes, he did. He actually recorded an album. His artistic name was Spider Web because his fingers would spread so wide, they would call them spider webs, and he loved to play classic boogie woogie piano, Fats Waller and Duke Ellington inspired, and he and his buddies recorded an album in downtown Seattle. There used to be places you could go to record a vinyl album.
Do you have a recording?
I do, yes.
That's your old man, huh?
That's him.
That's so cool to have that.
Yeah, I really had a great family life. I'm really lucky.
Did he encourage you to play music too?
Oh yeah, my parents were kind of disappointed that I didn't go into, do very well with my piano classes. I found it kind of boring, and my dad, wanted me to get into real estate. He wanted me to, come down and work with him, and I said, Dad, I'm working on a couple of stories now I got to do with, the newspaper, so. And then, kind of switched gears after a couple of years at community college, discovered, film and television. And I was really inspired by Saturday Night Live. And I thought, boy, this is where it's at. This is what I want to do. I really felt that was my true calling. So
where did you go to community college?
I went to Highline Community College, worked on the Thunder Word, the school newspaper there. And, I think I did some humor columns, but I was also a photographer at the time, and I would cover sports. And I worked at the West Seattle Herald. I was the youngest sports editor in the history of the West Seattle Herald when I was 17 years old. I took over.
That's pretty cool. The highlight of my life, one of them, and there aren't many, was to be the commencement speaker one year for the graduating class of Highline Community College.
Well,
And so I thought this would be funny, Scott. I get up, you got to wear the whole gown and all this stuff, and you're wearing the mortarboard hat. And they introduced me. Pretty big crowd, too. They had it at the Tacoma Convention Center in a big room there. And so I get up, I'm introduced, and I get up and I go,
Greetings to you graduates. As you move on in your life and find yourselves at various times being forced to listen to long, dull speeches that go on and on, I hope you will think back to my speech today and remember that it was not one of them. Goodbye and good luck.
And then I turned and as if to go sit down, and then they waved me back. It went over poorly, but I didn't tell any of the important professors and people there that I was going to do that, so they thought that they were getting ripped off initially when it was just part of my hilarious and inspiring speech.
Well, it's funny to look back at it and realize that, and surprises in comedy are always a good element.
I'm surprised when anything lands. So you went to community college. Did you go on to another level of college, or did you?
Yeah, I got my AA degree at Highline, and then I decided to switch my career from journalism to film and television and media. So I went to ended up getting my Bachelor of Arts at Eastern Washington University.
Oh, yeah.
Eastern Washington University was founded in 1882 by a $10,000 grant from expressman Benjamin Pierce Cheney, originally known as Benjamin P. Cheney Academy, to honor its founder. Congratulations to the graduates of Eastern Washington University. Hats off to you for a fine job of fulfilling your dreams, goals, and aspirations.
I really never thought about them as an alternative for myself, because I was also interested in that stuff, but I didn't know that Eastern had a program like that.
Yeah, I was researching for a while what good universities to finish my degree at, and I knew I wanted to get somewhere that had a TV studio where I could actually get hands-on experience. And I looked into the UW, and I thought theirs was just too academic, too much classroom work. And then Wazoo, I don't think I could afford it. I was very poor and broke at the time. I was truly a struggling college student.
You had enough gas to get to Cheney, but not enough to get to Pullman.
Not enough to make it back, really.
To make it back,
so,
yeah.
So it's a one-way ticket, 4.5-hour drive, as I recall, in my crappy little Toyota Celica. It was a great place to go to school because that's all you could do there. There was really nothing else. There was, maybe a bar in the Showies. There was a bar or two, but, nobody could afford to go out. So we just kind of lived and worked at the studio at the college campus. And so there was a radio station. I did a morning radio show.
Playing only the best music in the world. This is your number one radio station.
Tried to be funny on the radio, and then we would do, go to our classes, and then at late afternoon into the evening, we'd produce shows. And so, I was there probably 12 hours a day.
You have to be, and you're the winner of 3 National Emmy Awards. You're probably the most distinguished graduate from that program, aren't you?
Oh, I don't think I'm the most distinguished. I think, one of my classmates was Colin Cowherd from who's on ESPN now. He's a huge name, and he makes millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, no, actually, he's over on Fox now.
Is he really?
Yeah.
It's The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. Mark Few, coach of the Gonzaga Bulldog. My buddy for a long time will be joining us today. Always makes fun of the show. He goes, nice you could squeeze a little college basketball into your football show. So,
what the heck?
I know.
I've been emailing the wrong email address.
No wonder he's not responding.
That's right. And then I just want to give a shout out to another great classmate of mine, a successful TV and screenwriter named Tim Kelleher.
Oh, yeah.
We were at a table read, and I was just looking across the table, and here you have Robert De Niro, Sylvester Stallone, Alan Arkin, Kim Basinger, and I'm going, I'm looking at 4 Oscar winners in front of me at the table, I had chills. I mean, even as I talk to you right now, I still kind of get chills. It's so unbelievable. I mean, it's beyond anything you could ever wish for. And I just feel so grateful that we have this cast.
I used to see Tim Kelleher's name pop up all the time on the credits of various shows. So is he still at it?
He is. He's still working. He moved to Ashland, so I don't think he's far from you. And he's still writing.
He's probably trying to punch up some of those Shakespeare plays there in Ashland.
Yeah, they need help. That Shakespeare guy.
They got to be updated. They're getting a little long in the tooth.
They are. Yeah. So we had a couple of great professors. I just want to honor them. They passed away by now. Dr. David Terwishi. He was a real good mentor to us young, struggling media students. And then the mean old infamous Dr. Howard Hoff, who a lot of Seattle media people took at Eastern. He was a real character, just a codgy old man who he wasn't afraid to tell you in class, in front of everyone, as you were doing a presentation in your ill-fitting suit, Shafer, you're stupid! Sit down! He would just really berate it.
I love it. I just got word that another of your professors passed away during listening to this podcast. So they're pretty much all gone now.
Yes, you hear a spinning sound. That's them rolling over in their graves right now.
So Scott, then you graduate. Now what happens?
Well, I graduated. I had a great reel that I built through my time at Eastern. I had a demo reel on 3/4 inch tape, and I sent it off, even though it cost me, I think, $32 per tape to send out. Those were expensive.
I also had a 3/4 inch demo tape. Unfortunately, my 3/4 inch tape was measured lengthwise. So it wasn't very long, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
It was very short.
Very short. So did that help you get a gig?
No, it didn't. So I came back to Seattle because I was done in Cheney and I was getting kind of tired of, being the graduate, hanging out still. It didn't really feel right. And so came back to Seattle. I had, my family here and a girlfriend. And so came back here and submitted my resume and my demo reel to all the stations, King, Cairo, Como,
Crack, Cuckoo, Kaka, KFC,
KCPQ, KSTW. I thought for sure I would get a bidding war for my services, but nobody bid. And so then kind of got a little frustrated. I went back to work, at a job that I'd done to help me get it through college in a boiler room at a weekly sporting newspaper called Fishing and Hunting News. I was a phone salesman in a boiler room on East Lake Avenue here in Seattle.
You have to be closing all the time and be aggressive. Learn how to push.
Why would you leave that gig?
Welcome to the new American dream.
So I came back and I did that. The good news was, we worked on commission and a lot of the top salespeople there were making about $20 to $25 an hour, which for, the mid 80s was pretty good.
It's still pretty good, actually.
So then I had a couple of old friends that I reconnected with, and one of them was a guy named Pat Robinson, and Pat and I thought that we'd watched Almost Live and we thought, wow, this show could use some help. And so we were big fans of SNL and we would, kind of study the sketches and maybe he had a VHS player that he'd record the show and we'd watch them.
One cheeseburger, one Pepsi. Cheeseburger,
Pepsi. Cheeseburger, 4 Pepsi, 2 cheap.
Cheeseburger, 2 Pepsi, 1 cheap.
So we started writing sketches and I was like the typist and he and I came up with a couple of ideas and we submitted scripts to Dana Dwinell at King TV. And she, lo and behold, I couldn't believe it. After about 3 or 4 submissions, she bought one of them.
Really?
Which, we called Total Control. It was about a magical TV remote control that could control people. What a twist.
I remember that bit so well. It was, John Keister had this, recurring bit called Assignment Danger. And I think Total Control was one of those assignments.
That's right.
And as you just said, the premise of it is that what if you could control real life as you can control a TV set? So you could make people go backwards. You could make them go fast or go backwards fast or whatever, or pause them. that kind of, almost a little bit of a, Twilight Zone-ish aspect to it, but not really so absurd, today perhaps to think that way. But that was an incredibly, to my mind, inventive sketch for its time. This would have been, the mid-'80s?
Yeah, that would have been 85, fall of 85 that got produced, and I ended up working for free on the production of it. I let them know, I think Dana may have called me and told me we're going to buy this sketch for $50. And so I said, well, do you need help in the production? I've got, I just graduated from college. I know how to set up cables and audio and lights, and I'll do whatever you guys need. I'll get you coffee. And she said, sure. And so she connected me with their DP editor at the time, Mike Boydston, who I really credit for making Total Control work. He's the guy that came up with the idea of having Keister walk backwards through Northgate Mall and then reversing the footage so it looks like he's the only one walking forward. Yeah. Everyone else is moving backwards.
Brilliant. It really was at that time and at this time, for that matter.
Total Control. I've never seen the Total Control brand before. Well, I think this is one of the new units that's just coming in. And well, I can tell by looking at it that it's got a lot of options on it. Probably a couple $100 more. What's this thing right here? What's this slow motion? Oh, and what is that? Okay. Oh, well, gee, that's really interesting. Yeah. Let me try this. What's this fast forward? What's that? Okay. That's amazing. Yeah. What's this? There's a pause button. Okay. What does that do? Okay, that's another special.
Well, something else, Pat. You're tied into this too because I think I sent you the screenshot of an old piece of paper from the 1986 Northwest Emmy Awards.
Yep.
And Total Control won an Emmy, and you know what it beat?
No.
It beat your beloved Sluggy sketch.
Oh man, what a ripoff.
Well, looking back, I think Sluggy should have won.
Well, you know what? I'm going to have that investigated for fraud. Right?
Yeah, I believe there is fraud, and I think we should maybe storm the Natus headquarters.
Yes, I think I'm going to make that happen as soon as we wrap it up here.
Sounds good.
But writing that sketch as you did, this is the thing that so many people who otherwise are inventive writers never quite get. You can come up with this wonderfully creative idea, but if you haven't also stopped to think, how much would this cost to do? Or how would I pull it off? It might be a fine idea, but is it technically possible to do it? So I'm assuming as part of your writing process, you also thought of how this Total Control thing would work, how you would get people to go fast and slow and pause and all that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
You got to think that way. That was something we would see a lot of sketches come in through the years at Almost Live. The ideas weren't bad, but the execution would have been impossible because we didn't have a budget to speak of. So go sell it to SNL. Maybe they'll buy it.
Yeah, well, that was the joy of working on Almost Live in the early days was, you would pitch an idea and you think, well, how can we pull this off? And then you bring in Boydston and he's got a cinematographer's eye and he's just a brilliant shooter and editor and he's always able to storyboard in his mind. And so you would brainstorm and next thing you know, you're out shooting it and it's working. Yeah. And so, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was just a remarkable confluence of really talented people that somehow all lined up together at a point in time. Amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, and we really had no idea at the time that, it was such a big, cool thing. It was just, it was kind of a hassle. You weren't being paid enough. You'd have to be there all day and you'd have to go out on shoots. And, how much Thai food can you bother to eat with Mike Boydston?
Oh, well, I think it's dangerous to try and find out the answer to that for sure.
Yes.
It's a gas!
So you got that one sketch sold. You even won an Emmy for it, as you just said. So was that a easy entree to becoming a regular staff member after that?
Well, I wouldn't say it was easy because I did work for free on multiple shoots for about 3 months. And then I think at the beginning of January of 86, Dana got a budget increase and she was able to bring me on as a writer part-time. the same week that Joe Guppy and a guy named Bill Nye got hired at Almost Live. And we were all paid the same, I think $130 a week, or at least that's what I was made to believe. So I still had to keep my nighttime job. And I remember Bill Nye was still working at Boeing, and Joe was, I think, doing improv. And so, you know, we all worked
$130 a week.
Hard as we could. Yeah, $130.
I don't want to cause trouble, but Nye told me he was making $2,500 a week at the time.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. You have to work that out with him. It's history now. That's all I know.
It is history.
So now you're full time and you're really getting up to speed, writing a lot of stuff. What other pieces, if you can remember, were you really happy with?
Well, there was another one that Pat Robinson and I came up with we called it the psychic lens. And that was basically a telephoto lens on a camera that could read people's minds. So the idea was to go out and shoot footage of people walking on a public street, say in, you know, 5th and Pine in downtown Seattle. And then the psychic lens would magically, you know, transcode their thoughts into the voices of what they're really thinking. So,
you know what? You mentioned Steve Allen a little while ago, and I too was influenced by him. A lot of people were, but he used to do a bit, perhaps a precursor to yours, where he would just put the camera. They didn't have portable cameras then, so they just wheel a studio camera out onto the street just outside the studio. And he would just muse on what people might be thinking or saying to each other as they walked right by the studio there. I just thought it was terribly hilarious. And it showed what a great ad-libber he was.
People didn't know they were on. Let's take a look at this. Hollywood and Fire. And let's see what these folks are doing. This guy's trying to see if they have enough money so he can buy himself a shirt, I think. Either that's all that's left of his Santa Claus suit from Christmas, whatever the fuck. Oh, it's fuzz time, folks. Scoo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Little does he know his bike has just been stolen, ladies and gentlemen.
But that idea of putting thoughts or words into other people's heads became kind of a trademark thing of yours through the year.
Yeah, it was on Almost Live. We called it Street Talk, and it became a good recurring signature bit of mine. I was the guy behind it. And so I'd go out with Boydston and we'd shoot for, 6 or 8 hours, and I'd come back and review all the tapes and kind of do a cut down reel of the best clips, and then start writing jokes, and then bring in the other writers, and we jam on ideas. And before you know it, we're, recording voices in I don't remember the old edit bays.
Oh yeah.
In the basement of King. Yeah. We'd close a door in this tiny little room, and Boydston would record our voices, and, it was mostly all the writers doing the voices.
Now, how did you get around the problem of the female voices, or did you do those too?
Unfortunately, I did a lot of falsetto voices. Oh, please don't. How do you like my hat? Please don't step on my foot. You may remember some of those great moments.
I do, now that you mention it, yeah.
So that shows another influence. Monty Python was another big influence.
Why are you always on about women, Stan? I want to be one. What? I want to be a woman. From now on, I want you all to call me Loretta. What? It's my right as a man.
Well, why do you want to be Loretta, Stan?
I want to have babies. You want to have babies? It's every man's right to have babies if he wants them. But you can't have babies. Don't you oppress me. I'm not oppressing you, Stan. You haven't got a womb. Where's the fetus going to gestate? You're going to keep it in a box?
They I don't know why that resonates as so funny, and perhaps it's considered politically incorrect nowadays, but that idea of men, I mean, even in Shakespeare's day, men played female parts, and not for comedic purposes necessarily either.
I gotta give another shout out to Bob Newman, who played Gertrude. Gertrude was a huge influence.
La 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 la, P for two, do for T. Hello, who's this calling?
Listen, Gertrude.
Oh, hi, Julius. How are ya?
and everyone knew it was a man, but he just committed to it. Like you, Pat, when you do a bit, you just commit to it. And that's what makes great comedy actors and comedians so good, is committing to it. Like Will Ferrell, who'll come out in a green Speedo and not even acknowledge it.
Yeah. And not be embarrassed by it. Yeah.
And he doesn't give a damn. It's like, and that's what makes it so funny.
I love it. I love it.
Gru, it's bad enough that she wore shorts. But for the love of God, why are those shorts so short?
Why are long pants long? Why are bushes bushy? I mean, if we're going to get in that area, we're going to be here all day, Am I missing something? Am I missing something? Do you not want me to be patriotic?
No, Dale, it's just that those shorts don't even look comfortable. Okay, we can see your bulge.
Okay, first of all, they're extremely comfortable. And second of all, at this point in your life, if you haven't seen a bulge, well, I just feel sorry for you.
So, Scott, you're happy as a clam. I think you get married during that time at Almost Live, and everything's going fine. And then the star of the show, Ross Shafer, gets an offer.
Yeah, well, that was in April of 1988, and I didn't get married till a year later. And I just want to also acknowledge my lovely wife, Teresa.
Wouldn't you agree, baby, you and me got a groovy kind of love.
Who has been my best audience since I met her in, I think, the fall of 1987. And I got to interject here a quick story. One of our best dates in the early days, we went to a Halloween party. I think it was at somebody's house you may know. His name was Pat Cashman.
Oh, yeah.
He used to have the best Halloween parties.
Thank you.
So she dressed up as a zebra, and I had, that I bought at a thrift store, an old Seattle Animal Control uniform jacket. And so I had a zebra on a leash, and she was incredibly well made up. It took her hours to get the makeup on. And so
I think somewhere around the house I have a color photo of that zebra outfit.
yes, and we have a photo,
Talk
a
about a waste
Polaroid
of film. Yeah, I could.
that we took in your picture yourself dead coffin that you had in one of your many rooms.
Yeah, we would have these Halloween parties at my house. Steve Wilson was another member of the Almost Live show, and he would kind of co-throw the parties with us. We would do these animatronic things, very influenced by going to Disneyland too, where they had, the presidents, the Hall of Presidents, I think they called it, and they would all move around and they would talk and stuff. So I saw these big animatronic gorillas or something in front of a car wash. I know it was the Brown Bear car wash. So they animated a brown bear in front of the car washes. So I investigated it a bit and I found out you could rent those things. So we would rent like 2 or 3 of them. We wouldn't have bear outfits on them. We'd put different kinds of things on them, monster outfits or whatever. So every room in our house had a different kind of exhibit. One might be called the Deli of Doom, and there would be a proprietor around this display case where you could get, lady fingers that were actual fingers and stuff like that. It's pretty stupid stuff, but people ate it up and they loved it.
Oh, I got to tell you right here, Pat, that party that you threw in '87 was one of the best parties I'd ever been to, and I'll never forget the butcher shop, the Deli of Doom, where pieces of meat would kind of move and you hear a voice as if the meat was talking. It was brilliant.
Well, maybe not. And sometimes just to cut corners, we'd do very simple exhibits. One I remember was out in my front yard. I kind of dug up some earth and there was some disturbed area of ground. And then I festooned the top of that with various hats. There'd be cowboy hats, ball caps, that kind of stuff. Just the hat was in the ground. And then a sign in front of it that said, "Danger, quicksand."
Wait, that's quicksand.
I don't like this.
A low-tech bit, but it looked kind of funny.
It worked.
Yeah, it worked okay.
It's comedy. So anyway, I know if I got off on a tangent there, let me get back to when Ross got the gig in LA. It was April of '88. Ross, of course, was very ambitious. He had a daytime talk radio show on, I think it was on KJR.
KJR, Seattle, Channel 95. Go, go!
And he was doing extremely well. He had all these ads that he was appearing in and getting a lot of sponsorship money. I think he was driving a Ferrari at that time. He had an agent, and his agent got his taped in the right hands at a new network called Fox Broadcasting, who was trying to revive The Late Show, their late night TV offering that Joan Rivers had originally hosted.
First of all, it is Columbus Day, and everything is closed except my mouth. And
she left, and then a comedian no one had ever heard of named Arsenio Hall took it over.
But on K-Big, they talked about this store in Yugoslavia, and They have a store there run by psychics, and this is interesting. They tell the customers, before you come in, think about what you want. And when you walk in, we will tell you as you're walking in what it is you want before you speak. I guess that's cool. I don't know. It could be an interesting concept. Could be embarrassing, too, if you walk in, the guy says, deodorant.
And then he left, and they tried to revive it one more time, and Ross got the gig along with another comedian named John Mulrooney from the East Coast.
Yeah.
And so originally it was kind of a competition. Ross would host the show 3 nights a week, and then Mulrooney 2 nights, and they'd alternate the next week. So I was part of Ross's team. Jim Sharp and myself, we came down, and we, what Mulrooney and his team didn't know, and the people at Fox for that matter, is that we had done 3 years of Almost Live, and we had, this book basically of sketches that we could just repurpose on a national level and reshoot in LA. And they thought we were just brilliant. How are you coming up with these great ideas?
Yeah.
Where are these coming from? You guys are brilliant.
Did you have any compunction about leaving town and heading to LA, or were you eager to do it?
Oh, I was eager to do it. There was Almost Live was, a great place to work, but it was, like any writer's room, it was very competitive. And for a while, one of the gags, if you were pitching a joke and it didn't get a reaction, somebody would say failure. And so after a while, that kind of got old. And then I remember Joe Guppy kind of redirected everyone. And this was, I really credit Joe for this. Instead of saying failure, why don't we say success when you do something that works? And so we did switch the mindset of the writer's room, and I think that changed how the show was done.
That success thing became kind of a mantra
It did.
that you still use all the time.
Oh yes,
Great.
no, I still use positive affirmations based on my knowledge of how that worked for everybody there. But another thing we would all talk about is, I'm going national. I'm going to go national. We're going to get out of this dead end town. We would joke, even though we all loved living and working here, we all wanted to go national. And so Ross was the first to go national. And I was so lucky that he and Jim Sharp chose me to go with him. And so, one day we're here in Seattle doing, Almost Live. And then, the next day I'm on an airplane flying into LAX, and drivers are driving us to the Hollywood Hilton, and then a driver drives us onto the Fox lot, and suddenly we're in this multi-million-dollar studio stage with, Joan Rivers' old dressing room and this whole floor dedicated to writers. And it was just, I got to tell you, it was just a whirlwind.
Yeah, boy, I can imagine. It must have been amazing.
And I'll never forget looking out the window in Ross took over Joan's office, and it had this beautiful view of the Hollywood sign. And I remember looking at that Hollywood sign going, I can't believe I'm actually working in Hollywood.
Going down in Hollywood. You better hope that you don't run out of gas. Down in Hollywood. They'll drag you right out of your car and kick your ass. In Hollywood. They're standing on the corner just waiting for a sucker like you. Down in Hollywood. Now, if you want to stay healthy, just keep them moving right on through.
I went from, at the time I was also associate producer of Almost Live, which meant I was the guy that got all the props and arranged for locations. And I was making, I think, $460 a week So I went from $460 a week to making, I think it was at least $2,000 or $2,500 a week, and I was suddenly in the Directors Guild.
Be careful.
In Hollywood. I couldn't believe it.
Isn't that great?
And the best part is
that you were so thrilled about it. You weren't blasé about it. It's kind of weird to think, hey, I'm a kid from West Seattle. This can't be happening to me.
But here I am.
Yeah, it was a thrill, and and we kind of absorbed some of the writers from Mulrooney's show, a guy named Hal Spear, and then I brought my old friend Tim Kelleher and got him into Hollywood during that time, and he worked on the show as a writer. And there's a guy named Fred Wolf, who's now a director. He worked at Saturday Night Live, and Robert Kuhn, and all sorts of other incredibly far more talented writers than I. And it was just a pleasure to be able to work, in the Hollywood system at this new network, doing a show every single night. This wasn't just once a week. This was, every night. And so
you got a lot of famous people coming and going.
Yeah.
As guests. That must have been pretty heady too.
Yeah. I would remember sitting in the green room because I wanted some free food. We didn't really have time to get meals. And so there was always food coming into the green room, and you'd sit there, and all of a sudden here comes Dick Van Patten, or there's James Brown, and then Liz Taylor comes in the room, and
on your knees,
or Michael Jackson.
So you're doing that, but that show doesn't last very long. It's like 6 months, and now you're out of a gig.
6 months, and then then it get canceled, and that was my first experience with a cancellation. And I was pretty had a big impact on everyone. And so then the great thing about working in television in Hollywood is you make a lot of friends, and you work with a good group of people, and somewhere in that group somebody's going to find something else, and they may hopefully invite you to come work with them because they liked you and they were comfortable. And so there's the secret to that is don't burn your bridges. Don't ever burn bridges, even if you work with the worst a-hole in the world.
Unless you happen to be a professional bridge burner, and then...
So where did you go right after that, Scott?
Well, right after The Late Show, I ended up going to a hidden camera show on Fox called Totally Hidden Video, which was basically a redoing of Candid Camera. And then I worked
That is a concept that never goes away, by the way. I was just watching one today with a professional basketball player. He's the host of it. It's a prank show. So people love those. They're not too expensive to produce, and it's fun. They obviously work, or they wouldn't keep making them. So there was
right.
Totally.
So there's a lot of them on
Totally Hidden Video, and then what?
And then I worked at Fox On Air Promotions. Somehow they found out I was looking for work and recruited me. So I did promos for shows like the Tracy Ullman Show, or Married with Children, or let's see, what else was there? There was a couple of other shows. So, you'd get a preview tape, or a live uncut version from a shoot, and you'd have to turn it into a 30, a 60, and a 90-second promo. And that was good exercise in learning how to break down a story and retelling it in a tease that lasts, 30 seconds, sometimes as short as 10 seconds. I remember It's Gary Shandling Show was another one that I did promos for. And so I actually got to shoot with Gary and his team. And, we did a bunch of promos, and, it was pretty exciting.
Tonight on It's Gary Shandling Show, the Schumachers need a sitter.
Why don't I take care of Grant for a couple days?
So why don't they ask Gary?
The one time he took care of our plants, they died. Yeah, but they were old. Maybe it was their time to go.
Can Gary return their son in one piece? It's Gary Shandling Show tonight on Fox.
Then you came up with some shows of your own, including one that you were kind enough to let me kind of peek in at, called Say What.
Yes.
You'd sold it to CBS.
Yes, through Moffat Lee Productions, the people that did not necessarily the news, John Moffat and Pat Lee. And so, we sold that to CBS. We got a pilot plus 2. We did 3 episodes. And in fact, at one time we flew you down to, audition as host, but, ultimately, a young rising comedian named Bill Maher got the gig as the host.
That bastard.
New rule, if your website makes me choose a country from your drop-down list, put the United States on top. Don't make us all scroll through the 100 countries even Rick Steves couldn't give a shit about.
And that show was basically, it combined my word on the street talk, of dubbing voices over real footage.
Now, this is where we take our cameras out in the street somewhere in Los Angeles and shoot people on the streets with our cameras. Then we bring the film back, take the words out of their mouths, and put our own in.
I'm wearing a swimsuit that's much too small for me.
Well, of course, while I would have loved to have been the host of a show like that, or in the big time, as they say, it really wasn't in my wheelhouse to move to L.A. It really wasn't something I wanted to do. So it turned out better for me because you would send me a bunch of tape that you had shot around L.A. and in various places, construction sites and shopping malls and what have you. And then you just send it to me, and then I'd sit in my little editing room after my work was done for the day at King. I'd be there all night long, just looking at these tapes, trying to come up with premises and little comedic moments from these tapes. It was real fun, and I didn't have to move anywhere to do it. It was great.
That's all I have to say about that. You were right up there talent-wise with, I always thought of you as the next Phil Hartman.
Well, that's very kind of you. And
don't tell your wife that, though.
The reason I paused for a moment, I wanted to make sure all of this was being recorded. And yes, I've got it. Okay, good. So you did that for a while. As you said, that only lasted 3 shows, but there's always something else coming, and you kept working on it. Penn and Teller, I just saw a piece about Penn and Teller yesterday. They're part of this new enterprise called the Masters series or something like that. It's like going to school to learn how to be a director,
right,
or in Penn and Teller's case, how to do magic.
Yes, I think it's called Master Class.
That's it, Master Class. Thank you.
And no matter what level you are at magic, we got stuff here for you. Learning basic principles of magic, like learning chords on a guitar. Once you know a few simple principles, you can build your whole magic routine. And if you're smart enough to work silently, it brings out a huge amount of wonder.
But you have a Penn and Teller connection too.
Yeah, I became a field director / interviewer for the Penn and Teller Bullshit show on Showtime for a couple of years.
I think I've seen it on the Disney Channel too.
And that was after I'd come back to Seattle. That was in the mid 2007, maybe 2008.
Hi, I'm Penn, and this is my partner Teller. You may have heard vaccination causes autism in 1 out of 110 children. Total bullshit. It doesn't.
Before that, I worked on the Arsenio Hall show for a while and a couple of other shows, America's Funniest People. I was a field director on that. We'd go out and try to find funny people throughout the U.S., so it's a lot of traveling. And then, I think it was February of 94, Bill Nye called me up and said, "Hey, Scotso," because that was my nickname, Scotso. And so Scotso, what are you doing? And the Northridge earthquake had just hit maybe a week or so before, and then we'd been through the Rodney King riots, and we felt that life wasn't very good in Los Angeles anymore.
Yeah.
Teresa and I. And so he said, "Would you come back to Seattle to work on my new TV show, Bill Nye the Science Guy?"
Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Of course, I jumped at it, and it was so great to be able to move back in 94. And I was senior writer on the Nye Show for 3 years, and, that was another great experience working with people I used to work with on Almost Live, and then a lot of new people. And, it was a wonderful show because not only were we making people laugh, we were educating kids at the same time. And
Yeah. And that show was showered with awards, Emmys for the industry, but also from educators and stuff. It was a springboard for a lot of people's careers, and is a show that kids are still heavily influenced by today.
Oh, yes. And, the thrill of it, beating Mr. Rogers or Sesame Street in the national Emmys was not to be laughed at, because these are shows, had so much respect, and they were legendary shows. And all of a sudden this upstart Bill Nye guy comes down from Seattle and beats them. What?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, Scott Shafer has just talked about beating Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
That's the kind of person Scott Shafer is.
Yeah, you don't want to see his sweater after I'm done with him.
Scott, so you're back in town, and you did that work on the Nye Show and all that, but now you're involved with an enterprise that takes you back to what you started out loving the most, journalism.
That's right.
Tell us what you're up to.
Well, I've had a great career, great life, and, we have 2 kids, and there was a time in, must have been 2007 that I was looking for things to do online on Google, and I couldn't find any events in the Burien area for my kids, for the family to do. And so I thought, hey, there's these other new websites. They call them local blogs. There's the West Seattle blog. There's Capitol Hill. There was one in the Central District and one in Ballard. And I thought Burien could use a blog. And so I just started it as a hobby. I didn't think much of it. The name Burien blog was taken. So I came up with a nickname for Burien that was based on a local ice cream shop called the B-Town Scoop. I registered the name B-Town blog, and it was just a hobby. I didn't think I'd pursue it. And so, about 6 months after I started it, I started getting phone calls. How much does it cost? Or let me do that voice again. How much does it cost to advertise?
Oh, that's that wealthy dowager that lives on 3 Point.
The only female voice I can do for some reason. And then a guy named Larry Kaufman, who of course, from Marketing Magazine. I had coffee with him, and I said, Larry, I need your advice. I got all these websites. I was doing a comedy website and a couple of other hobby websites. And I said, which one of these do you think I should pursue? Because, suddenly the freelance market in Seattle had imploded after the recession of 2007, 2008. So there was really not much going on. So I could really pursue one of these. And so Larry immediately said, oh, you got to do the local websites. That's going to be huge. And so I took his advice. I'm sitting in the very office that he advised us to rent. And we've been here doing this successfully for over 13 years. And it grew from one local website to 7 now. We cover an area from White Center to Kent, and we try not to make big hair jokes, but there's still a little comedy, but, it's like riding a bicycle doing journalism. It's, it's who, what, where, when, why, how. And then, I like to throw in, like what's an interesting angle I could take on it. So
one of my stops along the way was doing TV weather, and I thought my calling was to try and be Mr. Funny Guy doing the weather. And then at some point I realized, you know what? People can go someplace else for comedy. When they tune in to get the weather, they want to know the weather. If you're a farmer, you need to know what's going to happen tomorrow. Is it going to rain or is it going to snow or what? It took me a while to get that through my head, but you're right. You can put some comedy in there, but people need their information and there are so few newspapers anymore that there's a dearth of information out there at the local level and in the neighborhood level that people just crave. And you found that niche, and it sounds like you're doing great.
It's an accidental new career, and my wife Teresa and I, we run the company. It's a very small outfit. She handles sales. I handle the content, and we make a living doing this. And we're very involved in the community. We're part of the chambers of commerce, and everybody knows us, and so it's a lot of fun to do.
Scott, when I started doing this podcast, I finally decided on the name Almost Live, Still Alive, because happily everybody, for the most part, that was ever a part of the show is still around. But you very nearly became the exception. Tell us about that.
Well, in May of 1996, I was due for my regular physical with my physician. And so when I went to get checked, he said, anything else bugging you? Everything seems fine. I said, well, I got this ringing in my right ear I've had for a couple of years. I think, can you check my ear? And so he looked at it and said, well, your ear looks fine. The eardrum's good. There's, no buildup of wax or anything. And I said, well, how can I get this really checked? He said, well, you can get an MRI. They'll do a brain scan. And my first thought was, after working on Bill Nye for a couple of years, I thought, oh, MRI, that means I'll get these slides of my brain. I could maybe make a lampshade out of it. And so I got the MRI and, I thought, oh, this is going to be cool when I finally get the scans. What can I do? What kind of art can I create with these brain scans? And of course, fast forward to May of 96, like 2 weeks after getting the MRI, or maybe a week after, I get a phone call at home on my landline, and that's my doctor, my physician. And he goes, Scott, just want to let you know that, your blood test came back okay, everything's good there, but we found something. And it's that dreaded phone call you get. What do you mean you found something? Yeah, we found a tumor on the other side of your head. Your ear's okay. There's nothing there. Well, there was something there, the ear, but on the other side of your brain, we think you have a tumor. And it's like, what? So I had no symptoms.
I hope he didn't deliver the news in that kind of a casual way, but...
No, he spoke like this, actually. This is the nurse.
Oh, it's a female physician, yeah.
Yes. And so, anyway, that was the worst phone call of my life. I was alone at the time. This is pre-cell phone use for everybody, and so my wife didn't know till she came home from work. And so I thought I was going to die. And, everyone who gets a brain tumor usually dies, right? So
in the movies, yeah.
Yeah, and so my only experience was a family friend who had a brain tumor, and he passed away, I think, 3 months at least, or sooner maybe, after he was diagnosed. And so I just kind of thought I was going to die. And your life kind of changes when you come face to face with your mortality. And so after a while of feeling sorry for myself, that might have been a month or so, I decided that, screw it, I'm not going to let this kill me. And so I learned to meditate. I went to these healing meditations and got on prayer lists and started changing my diet, eating, all organic food and a lot of what they call superfoods, broccoli and brown rice, and cutting down on sugar and alcohol. And so I basically thought of it as training for a battle or a boxing match is kind of the metaphor I thought of. And so got the tumor, went in for a craniotomy at the UW Medical Center. Dr. Mitch Berger removed my benign stage 2 oleodendroglioma, and he did it in I think it was an 8 or 9 hour surgery that they woke me up in the middle of to do what's called language mapping, where they probe around the tumor. And they wake you up first and your skull is exposed. And so they probe around the tumor to find out how it affects the area of, mine was near my Broca's area, the language area of the brain. And I told them, look, I'm a writer. I don't want to lose the ability to talk or think of words. So I need you to, do a great job. And so they did this language mapping, and I remember it very well. I think I'm going on, that'll be 25 years ago this August that I had that removed.
Oh, my word. Yeah.
And so I survived, and everybody, all my friends, were suddenly really nice to me, and they were wanting to take me out for lunch, and they thought they were saying goodbye, but they'd never say goodbye.
And now you can't get lunch from anybody.
Oh, no, yeah. Now it's like, screw you, Schaefer, you tricked us.
Well, Scott, I'm glad at that news. I'm glad, first of all, I'm really glad to know you. Thanks for sharing some stories about Almost Live and your time and your wonderful career. I would say, in a word, success.
Thank you, Pat, and same to you. I love you. I think you're one of the most talented, funniest, and most humble people. You've been a role model to me, and I know to many others, including an old intern who you're working with, Brian Shickley, who's doing a project that you're doing voices for. And so, it's a pleasure to just be able to talk to you again.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
The Almost Live, Still Alive podcast. Produced and edited by Morris Patrick Cashman. Technical director is Dave Tavers. This program was made possible in part by the 12th century nun and mystic Hildegard von Bingen, inventor of spoken language, and by Emil Berliner, creator of the microphone. And I'm your announcer, that kid from Sluggy, Chris Cashman.